Welcome to the Runway, where we cover current events in crypto, Web3, and tech. It's the weekend of the 12th to the 14th. Let's take off. All right, guys, a lot of action for you this weekend. First up, Bitcoin nosedives as political tensions escalate in the Middle East. Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies fall sharply following Iran's attack on Israel. Iran has responded to a potential attack from Israel that occurred maybe a week or two ago. Israel never claimed responsibility, but it resulted in the deaths of some Iranian personnel. So over the weekend, we've seen an unprecedented attack by Iran on Israel. They launched some 300-ish drones, missiles, etc. at Israel. This is seen as a greatly destabilizing thing that could potentially start World War III. Hopefully cooler heads prevail and we can come with some diplomatic solution here so things don't escalate out of control. Luckily, the Iron Dome, Israel's allies, including the US and some other European entities, have basically shot down 99% plus of all of the drones and missiles. It looks like there was no real deaths or damage that occurred from Iran's attack, despite it being unprecedented in its magnitude of missiles and drones, etc. So as a response to this over the weekend, because crypto markets are open 24/7, we saw a massive sell-off that occurred over the weekend. Crypto in general and Bitcoin as well. Obviously risk on assets, and when it comes to traditional TradFi money that's invested in these things, they get very nervous and sell off when there's global uncertainty. That being said, I think if there is global uncertainty, I think Bitcoin is probably one of the best investments you can possibly have. But what we've seen is almost something similar to what happened in 2021, 2020 when COVID first was announced. Bitcoin was around $10,000 and it sold off to somewhere between $2,500 and $5,000. It was a massive sell-off, if I remember correctly, right around COVID's announcement. And then within the next couple days to week, it obviously recovered greatly. So gold didn't perform any differently. Other supposedly risk-off things, everything sort of sold off before recovering greatly. And then, obviously Bitcoin went into a exponential bull run from there up to about $69,000. Even over the past day or two, it looks like Bitcoin's back up 1 to 2 to 3%. And here we are at the end of the weekend reviewing everything that's happened. Other cryptocurrencies as well sold off even more, and Bitcoin gained actually more dominance. It's almost like the flight to quality, I would say, in the sense of the safety and the assurity of Bitcoin's finite supply. Let's move on to our next story, which parries right into what I was just saying. Bitcoin dominance hits 3-year high as Bitcoin price dip pressures altcoins. Bitcoin's market cap dominance has hit its highest level in 3 years as altcoins feel renewed price pressure. Bitcoin's share of the total market cap spiking to 56.3% on April 12th. The only reason I'm pointing this article out is just because in times of uncertainty, altcoins and more speculative assets will have flight to quality towards Bitcoin, which is sort of the safety of that dominant asset in the crypto market. Binance executive tracked to Kenya, extradition underway. The Nigerian government is collaborating with Interpol and Kenyan police to bring Arjarwala back to Nigeria to face charges leveled against him. This whole thing is absolutely insane what Nigeria is trying to do to these Binance executives. The Nigerian government has traced Binance executive Nadeem Arjarwala to Kenya. According to the report from local media outlet Punch, sources from within the office of the Nigerian presidency disclosed that Arjarwala went into hiding once he arrived in Kenya. Arjarwala arrived in Nigeria in February following claims that the exchange manipulated the country's fiat currency, the Nigerian naira. Arjarwala was detained after a meeting with the Nigerian government. The country's Economic and Financial Crimes Commission heads up the investigation and slammed the exchange and its 2 executives with 5 counts bordering on money laundering. However, Arjarwala reportedly escaped custody on March 22nd and was able to board a flight out of the Nigerian capital, Abuja. Arjarwala reportedly flew out of Abuja on a Middle East airline. However, it is unclear how he managed to board the international flight, as his United Kingdom passport, which he entered Nigeria, remains in the custody of the Nigerian authorities. This is unbelievable. I mean, imagine the incompetence. This guy literally just took a flight out of Nigeria after they tried to charge him with, money laundering, manipulating the country's fiat currency. This whole thing is absolutely absurd. The Nigerian government's incompetence is the only thing to blame for their failing currency. To try to hold a crypto company executives responsible for manipulating the country's fiat currency, just absolutely absurd. I don't know how these clowns are getting away with this. So the other individual that's involved with this, Tigran Gambaryan, he's pleaded not guilty to the charges, with his wife and his others calling for release after several weeks in detention. This is absolutely absurd. I mean, this is a shame on the United States for not trying to help get this guy out of here. He's a respected United States investigator. He actually used Bitcoin's blockchain to create the largest pedophilia bust, I think, in the history of crimes of that nature. He's really a national hero. He put tons of predators and monsters away for life. And this was a global crime ring. They worked with many different entities all over the world to stop these monsters. So the fact that they're letting this guy be treated this way, and the U.S. hasn't put its foot down to try to get his extradition and get him out of there as a United States citizen is absurd. Shame on us for not helping with this. This whole thing is a giant sham. So shame on you, Nigeria, for doing this. Hopefully we will see their timely release, because this is absolutely absurd. The Ton Foundation teams up with Hashkey to drive crypto on-ramping in Telegram. Hashkey and the foundation are focusing their partnership on Hong Kong in the first phase. The TON started its life as a project by Telegram, but was picked up by members of its community after the messaging app abandoned it due to legal action from the SEC. The native token Toncoin was largely unmoved immediately following the announcement. So the stewards of the TON ecosystem have formed a partnership with Hashkey Group, the parent company of the Hong Kong licensed crypto exchange of the same name. So why am I pointing this out? It's another example of the U.S. incompetence when it comes to encouraging Web3 and tech adoption in the U.S. And it's just a par for the course for the SEC and the way it's been acting over the years. Very disappointing. Now we're seeing this incredible, interesting project with one of the largest messaging apps in the world, taking all of its business and all of its activity to Hong Kong, right? So it's not like the U.S. has stopped anything. It's forcing other countries that are now going to maximize and profit off of the benefits of Web3 and tech. So this is just another example of this. And it's very disappointing because Telegram is a huge messaging app and protocol that people all over the world use, right? And this could have been something that the U.S. could have embraced. They could be partnering here with Coinbase as opposed to some Hong Kong exchange. So very disappointing. Let's move on to our X Factor takes. This is my favorite one, which is the Time Capsule Tales, Daily History Lessons, Education Through Memes. I thought this was super interesting. So this is a story of the first U.S. coin that was used. The first slogan on a U.S. coin was not "In God We Trust," but was actually "Mind Your Business." So this takes us back to our country's founding and some of the principles that were enshrined in the Constitution, right? So in today's day and age where everybody wants to know everybody else's business, what everybody else is doing, they want to control what people are thinking, they want to control what people are saying, they want to control what people are doing with their bodies, they want everybody believing the same thing, they want to censor and do all these sorts of authoritarian overreaches, they want to spy on us with this whole FISA thing, they want unfettered access to violate the Constitution and do as they please, right? In the name of safety or whatever else they say. In the land of HOAs where everyone thinks they can tell everybody else what to do with their private property, which is just absolutely absurd in my mind. Now we've got an example of the roots of our country, right? The very first coin said, "Mind your business" on it. So I think this is super intriguing. This is the Fugio cent, also known as the Franklin cent, the first official circulation coin of the United States, consisting of a 0.36 ounce of copper and minted dated 1787. By some accounts, it was designed by Benjamin Franklin. Its design is very similar to Franklin's 1776 continental currency dollar coin that was produced in pattern pieces as potential continental currency, but was never circulated. We have gone from a society that prized privacy to one that seems hell-bent on destroying it. Thank God for open source software. This is just Alex Gladstein's take on this video, and I do agree with it. Wanted to point it out. Next up, Jason Yanowitz. We're witnessing this cycle's version of Black Thursday. It will be more muted than the COVID crash in March 20, but could get ugly for a few days. Equities nuke on Monday, pulling crypto down even further. Very necessary flush before the halving. Be patient, don't use leverage. Crypto is volatile enough, Web3 and tech, these technologies are new and there's a lot of volatility. People are going to make their own decisions and they're going to want to gamble and get rich quick, etc. But I think this is great prescient advice. Be patient and don't use leverage when you're investing in these markets and involved in the space. Daniel Turner to PTF. Oil prices are going to be insane with worldwide production at risk, but luckily we didn't drain the strategic petroleum reserves for political reason. Right, Joe Biden. The reason I'm pointing this out is because it has to do with the whole macro play of what's happening in the world and how oil prices and inflation and all these things tie in together, right? So for many of you who don't know, we went from being a net exporter of oil and natural gas and basically being the largest producer in the world to rolling back many of the regulatory cuts that were made in the previous admin and basically canceling pipeline deals and all sorts of things. And we very quickly saw these other antagonistic countries that many would say, like Russia, Iran, etc., look what they're doing. And how do they fund these things? How do they fund these attacks? How do they fund these wars? Well, oil is the answer, right? So OPEC and these countries that produce a lot of the world's oil, when the price of oil is high, guess what? They make a lot more money, right? So, and again, it's just a very simple supply and demand equation, right? When we produce more natural gas and oil and we release those on the market, we can keep the price lower, right? And that handcuffs a lot of these regimes. And the previous president understood this, but the current president obviously doesn't, and has been essentially draining our reserves here. If you look at the strategic oil reserves, they're down about 70%, over the past couple years, and that's been released here domestically. The oil is being released to our domestic market here from our reserves, basically to keep the populace happy and not have the free market actually show the facts of what's going on and how much the price actually is, right? Because when we're flooding from our reserves, the supply, to keep the price down low domestically. and that has repercussions. And now, when we're facing wars all over the globe, and many of the largest producers of the oil that we consume are largely antagonistic towards the United States. So we'll see how that plays out. Hopefully, it wasn't a desperate mistake to do this. Here's a post by Adam Cochran. I really like his content. He's a really interesting thinker. And he posts about the SEC and the Uniswap case. So to highlight just how outlandish the SEC proposed case against Uniswap is, it seems worthwhile to look at how the SEC is contradicting years of its own policy guidelines across multiple major points. I'm not surprised here. I think the leader of the SEC, Gary Gensler, is the ultimate hypocritical sellout. I mean, the guy should be ashamed of himself. I know I've said this over and over again on this podcast, but he goes on here in 33 separate posts to lay out the whole concept of what's wrong with the SEC and how biased they are and how they're violating their own. They'll go to a case and they'll make one argument and they'll go to another case and make the opposite argument within weeks. I mean, they're just the ultimate hypocrisy. There's no honor there. There's no esteem there. They are just political authoritarians pushing agendas from other people that are in power, like Elizabeth Warren and Joe Biden. So very sad to see. And we'll try to leave this thread in the show notes in case you want to spend 20 minutes going down the rabbit hole and reading through this whole thing. Let's move along. DS Batten. Just in, Bitcoin mining is winning. Paraguay Senate approves resolution to sell energy surplus to Bitcoin miners. Criticizes sale of energy to Brazil for 25% of what Bitcoin mining generates. Direct this new energy to 20 new Bitcoin mining companies instead. So great, interesting article here. Why would they take why would they sell the energy to Brazil and get 25% of what the Bitcoin miners are willing to pay for the energy? I mean, this is just capitalism 101. Doesn't make any sense. So obviously the Paraguayan Senate did a little research on this and decided that, hey, they were going to take the bidder that was paying 4 times the amount for the energy, which is just as they should do for their citizens and for the tax revenue, et cetera, and for revenue, right? So it just makes sense. Just common sense here. Here's the article that goes into detail about it from Bitcoin.com, and they kind of discuss this, and this is good. This is good to see. Next up, Cameron Winklevoss. Today, Tyler and I are excited to announce that Winklevoss Cap has made a 4.5 million Bitcoin investment in real Bedford, becoming co-owners alongside Peter McCormack and creating the first ever football club powered by Bitcoin. Why did we make this investment? A few reasons. Peter has a strong why. As a lifelong Bedford resident, bringing a Premier League team to Bedford has been a childhood dream of his. His mission is clear and authentic. We love builders who have a strong why. Peter has a vision and conviction. He is an OG Bitcoiner and hodler. Being early in Bitcoin is the ultimate acid test for vision, conviction, and being right. We love builders who have a long-term contrarian point of view and the determination and persistence to see it through, despite the ups and downs along the way. So, great to see this. I love this. Good for you. Good for the Winklevoss twins, and good for Peter McCormack because he's provided over the years great content for the space, great interviews. Might not always agree with him politically, but again, at the end of the day, people have different voices, people have different opinions, and that's the beautiful part of life, right? You don't always have to agree with somebody on everything, and you can still be friends, and you can still think that they provide great content and do great things for the world. So love to see it. Bitcoin Magazine. Just in, U.S. Senator Lummis and Congressman Nickel hold meeting to discuss why the U.S. needs to be a world leader in Bitcoin and crypto. Absolutely love this. It's too bad not more of these conversations are taking root and happening. But it's love to see those who have taken office and who are committed to the Constitution and see the potential here in this industry, pushing their vision forward and having discussions about game theory and about our space and asset class and pushing forward. Love to see it. South African hillbilly hodl. It never fails to hit me like a ton of bricks that once in cold storage, Bitcoin costs absolutely nothing to keep there indefinitely. No carrying costs at all. So he talks here about the difference between assets, right? So stocks, you have broker fees. Gold, you need 24/7 security if you want to physically custody it, right? You have to either have it in a safe in your house or you have to pay an entity to, deposit that and keep it safe. Real estate has taxes, etc. Costs ongoing with the properties. Insurance, all these different expenses, right? But Bitcoin, if you want to custody Bitcoin and you want to hold it, all you need to do is remember the words that encrypt your key, right? Or have your private key stored somewhere. It's really that simple. A seed phrase or words. or a flash drive if you want to, trust the ledger, but you still want to have your seed phrase in your words. Mark Andreessen, I regret not doing more to support and defend Brendan then. I should have realized what it meant and what was to follow. I do not intend to make that mistake again. So really interesting article here about Brendan Eich, who is the founder of Mozilla Firefox, and also who's the founder of the Brave browser, which blocks all of these trackers and ads that these big tech companies use. So soft shill for Brave, because I use it all the time, and it is my preferred browser. And every page you go to, it will show you how many trackers and ads and creepy things that it blocks from all of these tech companies, especially the likes of Google and Facebook, etc. So he's pointing out here the anti-fragile Brendan Eich, and it's just a little take about what happened maybe a decade ago. So he talks here, he writes, I debut in First Things Mag today, writing on Brendan Eich, who 10 years ago was attacked and chased out of Mozilla, a company he co-founded for taking private civic action based upon his quiet Christian faith. It was a pivotal moment in our society and for me personally. I was working in New York Silicon Alley when it happened, and I immediately recognized it as a major escalation in the culture war. It was a warning that the Leviathan of technocracy did not care how well I did, how hard I worked, or how well I treated others. Ideological conformity to the top-down programmatic transformation of the country that was rapidly taking place was all that mattered. If I was unwilling to affirm the current thing dictated according to the whims of progress, I was an enemy of humanity and an enemy of America. And my beliefs, no matter how ancient, innocent, and valid, must bow to the will of the Leviathan, or the digital swarm would descend upon me. In fact, the higher I rose, the harder opponents would hunt for an excuse to throw me, like Balthazar to the lions. Balthazar. So this really talks about let's see here. It really talks about this idea that as a Christian, how Brendan Eich he made private donations to a Christian charity that may have opposed certain things that not everybody agreed with, right? So, and they really threw him under the bus and forced him to resign as the CEO of Mozilla over his private donations, which is very anti-American. It's very authoritarian. And I think this is the beginning of sort of these authoritarian tendencies especially when it comes to big tech and censorship, et cetera, et cetera. Let's move along. Ryan Selkis, crypto is doing more to preserve civil liberties and protect constitutional rights than any of our three branches of government or major NGOs. Do not work with anyone in the industry who would be quick to settle this fight. Agreed with you there, Ryan. You hit the nail on the head. And that's the reason many of us are actually in this industry, right? We see the potential, the built-in code that preserves many of the freedoms and liberties that America was founded on. Caitlin Long here. This is a post from Dan Pantera Capital, Dan Moorhead, and here he sort of responds here to the ECB blog. So she says some may argue that the dollar itself is a confidence scheme. Dan Pantera. So let's look here at what the ECB wrote, and let's look at the article that reviews it. So the ECB, of course, obviously any central bank entity is going to be anti-Bitcoin because it takes away the power from them and essentially makes them obsolete, right? Likewise, Bitcoin is still not suitable as an investment. It does not generate any cash flow, unlike real estate and dividends, stocks, cannot be used productively, commodities, and offers no social benefit, gold jewelry, or subjective appreciation based on outstanding abilities, works of art. Less financially knowledgeable retail investors are attracted by the fear of missing out, leading them to potentially lose their money. So let's look at his response here. It's a peculiar assertion that an asset, particularly one that has nearly doubled in value annually over the past 11 years, is still not suitable as an investment. Apart from that, in our view, the notion that Bitcoin does not generate cash flows, lacks the social benefits associated with items like jewelry, or cannot be subjectively appreciated for outstanding abilities like artwork does not disqualify it as a suitable investment. The fact of the matter is that there really isn't much intrinsic value in most stores of wealth or mediums of exchange, including the dollar. One could argue that the government has imparted some value to the dollar by requiring that it be used to satisfy tax obligations. But if you actually tried accessing the true intrinsic value of the US currency by, for example, melting pennies to capture the value of its mineralogical components, that's actually a felony. Some may argue that the dollar itself is a confidence scheme, and with the US national debt at a record percentage of GDP, having confidence in the value of the dollar might be less rational than having confidence in the value of Bitcoin. There are also enormously important stores of wealth with very little intrinsic value, such as Jackson Pollock paintings. The actual value of the paint and canvas in a Pollock painting is $40. They trade for $100 million because people believe that in the future they will sell for at least that or maybe much more. That's the case with Bitcoin. People can store their wealth in it with the expectation that it will be worth at least as much, if not much more, in the future. As far as cash flows and dividends, the emergence of protocols generating real revenues is occurring, enabling traditional and more fundamental valuation frameworks to be applied to digital assets. And that's a quote by Eric M. Lowe. Full response by the ECB claims here. And I will add my own take on this as well, which my only thought of what makes Bitcoin suitable as a way to store your life's work energy is this idea of the mathematical code that is provable, that shows you that you will not be debased, that shows you that you will not be diluted, and that your share of the asset will be that percentage of 21 million, and that will never, ever change. And that certainty, I believe, is worth more than its weight in gold. Let's move along. Paulina Luna. This woman is an absolute national hero. So for many of you who don't know of what's been happening with this whole FISA situation, I guess the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, or whatever his name is, he basically folded like a pallet of bricks when the intelligence agencies got to him behind closed doors to basically try to convince him on why they needed to continue to violate the Constitution and the Fourth Amendment and why it was justified. And he folded. And I guess there was one individual who was sick, who was out for the vote. And Paulina Luna has forced to use some kind of procedural move to hopefully create a revote on this whole FISA spying issue on Monday, which is tomorrow. So let's read this by her. You cannot have a free and open society with the warrantless spying of Americans. Today, the bipartisan vote to force intelligence communities to get a warrant was lost by one vote. In an effort to stop this, I requested a rare procedural maneuver that will force a second vote on Monday. Hopefully, we can change minds. I will be writing all 435 members over the weekend. Please help me. Talk to your reps. We have one last shot at this. So, Paulina Luna, thank you very much. You are a national treasure. Hopefully the move works. Alexander Grieve, another Hester Peirce speech. The SEC has met inquiries about blockchain technology with a stubborn and decidedly uncreative insistence that existing rules work just fine. We have not worked seriously with people in the industry to figure out how to achieve our regulatory objectives in a way that is tailored to the opportunities and risks of the technology. Another great quote from Hester Peirce. Hopefully, she is the new chair of the SEC if we get a new administration in power in November. She would make a fine addition and be a great chair of the SEC. Paul Grewald.eth. This is something that happened a couple days ago. Today, Coinbase filed a brief asking the court's permission to seek an interlocutory appeal in our SEC Gov case on this controlling question, whether an investment contract requires something contractual. We think it does. The SEC disagrees. We're asking to take this up on appeal earlier than normal because it's critical to our industry. The SEC's action against us and other digital asset companies goes way beyond the legal authority granted by Congress and puts an unjust cloud over U.S. digital asset innovation. The not at all funny thing is we're not alone in thinking the question of when a crypto transaction might be an investment contract warrants interlocutory appeal. The SEC itself has made the identical arguments. In the Ripple case, they said specifically there is controlling question of law to which there are substantial grounds for difference of opinion, and noted industry-wide significance of the question presented. It goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. Digital assets aren't going anywhere, and Coinbase will continue to push for clarity for the entire industry and the 52 million Americans who own digital assets. In the meantime, we're business as usual. We appreciate the court's consideration of our request. So, from people that I've spoken to, this is it is a high gamble play here, and it's play that I think they're going to win. Honestly, I think that they do have the case law and they do have the record on their side for this. So I think that, especially when you look at the this whole idea of what is a security and the fact that it does require an investment contract, right? And this idea of what is a contract is it requires something. It actually requires a contract, and this goes all the way back to the Howey test. when they talk about the deal where people bought orange groves and that this company was going to manage the groves for them and give them and they were going to get the oranges and then they were going to sell the oranges and give them a percentage of the profit. This was indeed an actual contract, right? It wasn't just the fact that these oranges were all of a sudden a security. It wasn't the oranges themselves that were a security. It was the contract that made the whole arrangement a security. So I do think that Coinbase is going to win on the merits here, and it will be another disgraceful and disgusting loss for the SEC and a waste of taxpayer time and money. So good for Coinbase, and I'm glad they're fighting back and doing this. And I'm looking forward to see the results of this. Next up, Daniel Batten. The more energy Bitcoin mining uses, the more emissions it can reduce. 35 mid-sized venting landfills running Bitcoin mining is all it takes for Bitcoin mining to be the world's first emission-negative industry, achieved organically, without subsidy, without purchasing offsets. So this is a little bit of a flash forward to where we need to be, but it does show here that we're at around in 2024, and how that Bitcoin mining is one of the only industries that can take advantage of this methane venting that occurs at these landfills, right? Because all a Bitcoin mining operation needs is a shipping container with a Starlink satellite hooked up to it, and you're off to the races. You can do a clean burn on that methane, which is fantastic and very interesting. Warren Davidson. To restore a government small enough to fit within the Constitution, we need members of Congress committed to the Constitution. These are the 86 Republicans and 126 Democrats who want the government to spy on Americans. The Fourth Amendment says, get a warrant. They say no. It really is as simple as this, guys. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter how helpful or how beneficial it is to violate the Constitution. The fact is that the Constitution outlines individual liberties and, the rights of the people, and these rights shall not be infringed, right? I mean, it doesn't matter. Again, we could make the whole world safer every day if we banned driving and we made everybody wear bubble suits around. But we don't do that, right? Because we believe in freedom and we believe in progress and we believe in innovation. And sometimes, these things may make things a little less safe, but there's this idea of freedom, right? If you are a parent and you want to keep your child safe, you can protect them from the whole world. And I think that maybe it was Jordan Peterson who made this quote, and the quote goes something like this, and I'm just paraphrasing here. It goes, if you want to free your child, if you want to save your child's body, micromanage and do everything. Don't let them be free. But if you want to save your child's soul, let them be free, and it might harm their body, right? It's kind of this, and again, that was paraphrased, but it's this idea of, in order to live in a free society, there's going to be risks that amount, right? It's part of freedom. It comes with the territory. So it doesn't really matter that, whoever these intelligence agencies taking these people behind closed doors and basically telling them, oh, well, you're taking away one of our tools and we're stopping these bad people and doing these bad things. But the question is, at what cost? And the cost is the violation of the Constitution that was the founding document of America. So that cost is too great because it violates everything that America stands for. And we've seen the abuse of this power. We've witnessed it. We've watched these made up these phony FISA documents to go against political opponents. And we watched this whole thing play out with the whole Russia nonsense stories that came out politically. And we've just seen the total abuse of this. And it's not just like this is an occasional thing. They've spied on hundreds of thousands of Americans that have, and it's just a bunch of violations that should never be occurring and that are unconstitutional. And this government is growing larger and larger and larger and more powerful. And that was never the intention of what America was founded upon. That is literally what the founding fathers of our country ranted and raved against and did everything in their power to prevent. So I think that these people need to go back and read the Constitution, and they need to, all of these Republicans and Democrats, they need to go back and they need a basic civics class, and they need to go read the Constitution, and they need to go understand how America was founded and what the principles of America are and what has led to American greatness. Let's move along. Imagine if the FTC took Google to court in 1999 for operating an unregistered search engine. That's SEC versus Uniswap. U.S. regulators need to take a step back and ask themselves why really they're here. Or Congress stop the madness. The SEC doesn't regulate the internet. Great point by Ryan Sean Adams here from Bankless. hits the nail on the head. Here's a post from Rand Paul. History, and this guy's a national hero as well, history has repeatedly proven just how dangerous it can be when we sacrifice our rights to create a temporary and ultimately false sense of security. We must restore our Fourth Amendment rights. And I think he hits the absolute nail on the head. Thank you, Rand Paul. Jason Yanowitz, another post from him. BlackRock Orange and Franklin Templeton Green are now competing to put U.S. Treasuries on chain. SEC may be fighting us, but do not underestimate the progress that's being made. A few years ago, this would have been a pipe dream. So let me go down the rabbit hole just a little bit on this. And I know this is a point I've hit on different podcasts, but I'm going to hammer it again. This is absolutely enormous to see what's happening here on chain. This is essentially investment companies and wealth managers and banking entities essentially opening branches on chain. It's like opening a branch of your business on the blockchain. Fascinating stuff. And another aspect of this is the fact that the SEC and the government are essentially trying to stop a lot of the activity that's happening in the crypto sphere. But what they don't realize is that some of the biggest buyers potentially for U.S. Treasuries and U.S. debt going forward are going to be blockchains. They're going to be stablecoins. When the whole world is selling U.S. Treasuries and not buying U.S. bonds, Russia, China, et cetera, because you have politicized the money and made enemies and seized funds because if you don't agree with certain political things that are happening globally, the biggest buyer of Treasuries is stablecoins, is the Circles and the Tethers of the world. Let them. You should be rolling out the red carpet and helping in any way possible to allow this to happen. Because what does this mean? This means that the U.S. can issue more debt, and the blockchains and these companies that are putting treasuries on chain are going to buy those things up and hold those reserves and be the biggest customers for the U.S. government. So the whole thing is like so poorly thought out, and they don't really even understand or comprehend what's happening here. But they should be rolling out the red carpet for this. They should be doing everything in their power to allow this and to greenlight this and to make this happen and make it more easy and seamless. But alas, we've got incompetent people in power and hypocritical sellouts like Gary Gensler doing the absolute opposite. Let's see here. James OKeefe, I did not say that at all. Arel Heasmo, principal economist for the Federal Reserve, denies every one of his quotes when confronted by OKeefe and OMG. I don't know how this guy does it. This James OKeefe, man, he is unbelievable. He is like the best undercover journalist you will ever find. This guy gets these people, finds these people in power and pretends to be gay, pretends to be trans, pretends to be whatever he does to get them to talk to him. And he literally gets these people just to spill out all the propaganda, all the lies, all of the terrible things they're doing behind the scenes, and all the hypocrisy and probably illegal in some ways, especially this Heasmo. A lot of the stuff he's saying, he's basically writing speeches for the Fed Chair Powell. He talks about how political they are behind the scenes. It really is wild. So if you've got 20, 30 minutes, watch his other interview with this guy where he has one of his journalists who's a girl who pretends to go on a date with this guy. And this guy's just talking about, everything he's doing at the Fed, all the Fed policy, what they're doing behind the scenes, how he's helping write speeches for Powell, how political Powell is. And the reason I'm highlighting this is just because this has to do with the money supply of the largest fiat currency in the world, right? So the Federal Reserve Bank. And it is kind of fascinating to see what's happening behind the scenes. And this guy this Heasmo, he just essentially, after he says all this stuff and they got him on camera, he just lies when he gets confronted about it and just says, I didn't say that, but they got him on camera. It's crazy, right? Just unbelievable. I mean, this guy is probably going to lose his job and probably going to be in big trouble. But interesting to see the truth of what's happening. It's kind of wild. Robert Breedlove. Money is earned by trading your time, energy, and talents to your fellow humans. When money is unsound, your time, energy, and talents are diluted through the theft of inflation. Further, unsound money is born by borrowing and is thus usurious in nature. On the matter of unsound money, both Christians and Muslims can agree that it does not comply with their religious precepts. Seen this way, Bitcoin is the world's only incorruptible sound money, an inherently just monetary system that is free from any innate usury. And this is just a clip from his interview with Brian Estes from his podcast. I'm going to play it. It's like a minute or less. Just kind of interesting to think about. It's thought-provoking.
Because it's printing more money. That goes back to that unequal weights and measures. It's like having your thumb on the scale, diluting the wine with water. We take our time, our energy, and our talent to create dollars, and more dollars get printed in the future. That dilutes the purchasing power of our time, energy, and talent that we put in before. And so that's the same thing as diluting the wine with water.
Yes.
You're diluting the potency of the wine. And so that's unjust weight and measure. So that's the Christian view. But you could look at other world's religions. In the Islamic religion, riba is paying interest or receiving interest.
Okay. So usury, basically.
Yeah, usury. So if you look into that, the world's financial system is all based on paying interest or receiving interest. So there's approximately 2 billion Muslims out there whose the current financial system isn't compliant with the religion. And so you look at Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is compliant with the Muslim religion. The money's not sound because they keep printing more money.
You know, a lot of religious books, they have different moral decrees when it comes to giving loans and interest and usury and printing money. I guess one of the quotes from the Christian religion was something about corrupting the weights and measures. And the Muslims also have this idea of making usury or interest off the money, which a lot of loans are brought into the world by just printing money out of thin air, and essentially creating the money for the loan. Interesting stuff. Edward Snowden. This is a textbook case of congressional capture. With a single briefing, the intelligence agencies routinely transform their most strident critics into the tamest of cheerleaders. So very interesting here, and shame on you, Mike Johnson. This is an absolute disgrace here. So I'm going to just play this clip so you guys can see kind of what happens behind closed doors, how these guys will sit in, these intelligence agencies will come in and basically corrupt people's principles and say, the ends justify the means here. Let's violate the Constitution. So let's lay this out.
Sure, I saw all the abuses of the FBI, the terrible abuses over and over and over, the hundreds of thousands of abuses. And then when I became speaker, I went to the SCIF and got the confidential briefing from sort of the other perspective on that to understand the necessity of Section 702 of FISA and how important it is for national security. And it gave me a different perspective. So I encourage all the members to go to the classified briefing and hear all that and see it so they can evaluate the situation for themselves. And I think some opinions have changed both ways, but that's part of the process. You got to be fully informed.
Have you been? Excuse me.
The classified briefings behind closed doors justify the ends. Essentially, what they're saying is the ends justify the means, and I think this is a big problem here when it comes to our Constitution and what America was founded on. Is there's always an argument. An argument can always be made that the ends justify the means. Now, the question is, in my opinion, the ends don't justify the means. It doesn't really matter what's in that classified briefing. The ends do not justify the means. Next up, New Orleans Saints Captain Demario Davis, fiat money is unjust and corrupted. I'm Bitcoin only. So it looks like we've got another NFL athlete that will be taking his salary in Bitcoin. Very cool. Here's something interesting. Bitcoin's inflation rate will become lower than gold's post-halving. There is no second best. So what does this refer to? Gold historically, and the reason gold became really the best money in human history before Bitcoin was this idea of stock to flow. And every year, no matter how much gold was in demand, roughly between 1% and 2% was the most gold you could really find on the earth, right? You could only inflate the supply of gold by roughly 1% to 2% every year. And historically, it's about 1.5% to 2%. With this next halving about to occur, Bitcoin is going to drop to roughly 1% or less inflation rate. So it will have a better stock to flow ratio, a more scarce stock to flow ratio than gold. And I think that officially, right after this happens, Bitcoin will truly be and it already is fundamentally, but Bitcoin will be the money with the lowest stock to flow ratio. Only every year, less than 1% of the supply will be added for the next 4 years until the next cycle. And then that will become even more further scarce after that. Now, a couple more posts from Ryan Sean Adams. From Bankless, part of China getting an Ethereum ETF before the US. So it looks like Hong Kong is poised to approve spot ETFs for both Bitcoin and Ethereum as soon as Monday. BBG, another huge bullish catalyst for the two largest crypto assets. And I think that this is going to unlock tons more liquidity, and it's largely good for the industry. But sad to see that Hong Kong and Asia is going to authorize a spot ETF for Ethereum before the US has. And this is and shame on you, SEC, for stopping and going against your mandate of efficient markets. So shame on you. Let's blame grocery stores for inflation rather than the $5 trillion in printed money during COVID. Politicians assume we're dumb. We're not dumb. We're buying crypto. Touche. This is what the pipeline from BlackRock Treasuries to stablecoins looks like. In code. In goes US Treasuries, out comes USDC. There's 27 trillion in treasuries. The banks are opening branches on Ethereum. And this is what we talked about recently earlier in the podcast. And this is interesting. You can actually see the code of how it works, right? The redemption, the ERC token contract. It's just fascinating that you can actually go on chain, go to the Etherscan block explorer. You can view the contract's code and actually see how this is being done totally transparently. Unbelievably fascinating and cool. Finally, we'll end with this. Ryan Sean Adams, imagine blocking your son from life-changing airdrop gains. Yes, Dad, we'll cancel the Bankless subscription, but your kid is going places. It looks like, for many of you who don't know, Bankless has a little subscription where you pay annually and they will alert you in your wallets to a bunch of different airdrops or activities that happen that your account qualifies for. Pretty cool tool. I think it was called something else before, Earnify, or I believe maybe that's what it's still called, but I guess they bought it out from whoever created it, and now it's part of their whole Bankless experience. Cool product. I am a subscriber myself, but here this dad goes, my son signed up to this site without my permission. Can I get a refund, please? Otherwise, I will have to call the bank. Thanks. So let's just gift the kid a free sub. Probs deserve it with a dad like that. Spoiler, his dad is Gary Gensler. But yeah, Bankless HQ giving this deviant kid a free subscription. Dad will thank us someday. True that. We'll give David Hoffman a follow too, because he's the co-host on Bankless. He doesn't post as much, it seems. I always see Ryan's stuff all the time, and I don't see David's post very often, but we're going to change that. We're going to add him to the queue. All right, guys, that's all I got for you today. So stay safe, stay blessed, never stop learning, and keep an open mind. Thanks for listening.